He was not the kind of man who went looking for strange experiences. He believed in routine, in work done on time, and in returning home before dark. That day, he was traveling alone to inspect a small construction site near the edge of a protected forest. It was supposed to be simple: take notes, take photos, and leave. The weather report had promised light clouds, nothing more. Still, as his vehicle moved farther from the town, the road narrowed, the signal disappeared, and the forest seemed to close in around him. By late afternoon, the sky changed without warning. Thick clouds rolled in, and the air became heavy and cold. Wind pushed through the trees, making long, low sounds like whispers. He considered turning back, but the sight was close. He told himself he would finish quickly. Rain began to fall just as he parked near the trail. At first it was light, then strong enough to soak his jacket in minutes. He walked carefully, watching his steps as the ground turned slippery. The path he followed was old and uneven, clearly not used often. Tall trees blocked most of the light, making everything look darker than it should have been. He felt uneasy, though he could not explain why. It felt as if the forest was watching him, silent but aware. Then he heard it. At first, he thought it was the wind. A thin sound, broken and weak. He stopped walking. The sound came again, clearer this time. It was a cry, soft, strained, and full of pain. It did not sound like an animal, but it did not fully sound like a human either. His heart started to beat faster. Every sensible thought told him to leave. He was alone, the weather was getting worse, and the forest was not safe. But the sound came again, closer now, and he could not ignore it. Someone or something needed help. He followed the sound off the path, pushing through wet bushes and low branches. The ground sloped downward, leading to a shallow ravine filled with fallen trees and rocks. Rainwater ran between them, forming small streams. At the bottom he saw movement. A woman was trapped beneath a heavy branch. One leg was pinned, and her hands were shaking as she tried to push it away. Mud covered her clothes and her breathing was uneven. When she looked up and saw him, her eyes widened, not with fear, but with something else: relief, mixed with surprise. He froze for a moment. There was something unusual about her. Her face was sharp and expressive, her eyes bright and alert, in a way he had never seen before. Even injured, she seemed aware of every sound around them. For a strange second, he wondered if he was imagining her. "Don't move," he said quickly, his voice louder than he intended. "I'll help you." She did not answer with words. She only nodded once, slowly. He climbed down carefully, nearly slipping twice. The branch was heavier than it looked, soaked with rain and half buried in mud. He tested it, then adjusted his footing. With effort and more strength than he thought he had, he lifted one end just enough for her to pull her leg free. She cried out softly as she moved, then collapsed against the wet ground. He dropped the branch and rushed to her side. Her leg was bruised but not broken. He tore a strip from his spare cloth and wrapped it gently, doing his best to stop the bleeding. "You're safe now," he said, mostly to calm himself. She watched him closely as he worked, her eyes never leaving his face. There was an intensity in her gaze that made him uncomfortable, but he ignored it. Right now, she needed help. The rain grew heavier. Thunder rolled in the distance. "We need to get you somewhere dry," he said. "Can you stand?" She hesitated, then slowly pushed herself up with his support. She was lighter than he expected. She leaned on him, but her grip was steady. Together they moved toward a small rock overhang nearby, just enough to protect them from the worst of the rain. Once there, she sat down, breathing deeply. He checked her leg again. The bleeding had slowed. "Do you live nearby?" he asked. "Is there someone I can call?" She shook her head gently. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but unfamiliar in tone, as if shaped by a different rhythm. "You were meant to hear me," he paused. "What?" "If you had not come," she continued, "I would still be trapped." "Well, I just followed the sound," he said. "Anyone would have done the same." She studied him again, then lowered her eyes. "Not everyone listens." He did not know how to respond to that. The storm continued, but inside the small shelter, there was an odd sense of quiet. The forest noises seemed distant, muted. Minutes passed. She appeared to relax, but her skin was cold. He offered her his jacket, and after a brief pause, she accepted it. When she wrapped it around herself, he noticed a faint symbol stitched into her clothing, something that looked handmade and old. "Who are you?" he asked softly. She looked up again, and this time her expression was serious. "My people call me a guardian." He almost laughed, thinking it was shock or confusion, but her face showed no sign of joking. "Listen," he said gently. "Let's just focus on getting you help." She nodded, but her eyes held a strange certainty. Help has already come. Suddenly her body weakened. She swayed and nearly fell forward. He caught her quickly. "Hey, stay with me," he said. Her breathing slowed, and her eyes began to close. Before losing consciousness, she gripped his sleeve tightly. Her fingers were warm, despite the cold. "You are chosen," she whispered. Then she went still. Panic hit him. He checked her breathing. It was faint, but steady. He shook her gently, calling out, but she did not wake. The storm began to fade as suddenly as it had come. The rain softened, then stopped. Light filtered through the trees again. He stayed there watching her, unsure what to do next. There was no signal, no road nearby. Carrying her would be difficult, but leaving her was not an option. As he waited, he felt a strange shift in the air, like the forest itself was holding its breath. He did not know then that this moment would change everything he believed about the world, about fate, and about himself. He only knew that helping her had already pulled him into something far bigger than a simple rescue. And somewhere deep in the quiet forest, unseen eyes were already watching. He carried her carefully through the wet forest, unsure where he was going, but knowing he couldn't leave her there. The ground was slippery, roots twisting like snakes underfoot. Each step required balance and concentration. She remained unconscious in his arms, her breathing steady but faint. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, heavier than any tool or task he had carried before, after what felt like hours, but was likely only half an hour. He reached a narrow clearing. There, hidden among thick trees and tall grasses, was a small settlement. It was unlike anything he had seen before. Simple wooden huts stood in clusters, with smoke curling from stone chimneys. Small gardens grew in neat rows, and the smell of fresh herbs filled the air. Birds sang above, seemingly unafraid of his presence. There was a quiet harmony in the place that seemed almost magical as he stepped into the clearing. The settlement's inhabitants appeared. They were human in shape but moved with a graceful, almost fluid precision. Their eyes were alert and intelligent, scanning him with curiosity rather than fear. When he gently placed the woman down near one of the huts, they stepped closer to examine her, whispering to each other in a language he did not understand. Their voices were soft and musical, carrying a calm authority that immediately made him feel less threatened. One of them, a woman with long, silver-brown hair and eyes like amber, approached him. "She is safe now," she said in careful English, her voice gentle yet firm. "You have done what few would dare." "I didn't know what I was doing," he admitted, feeling embarrassed. "I just saw someone in trouble and I had to help." She nodded, as if that explanation made perfect sense. "That is why you are here. That is why you were chosen," he frowned. "Chosen? Chosen for what?" She smiled faintly, but did not answer immediately. Instead, she beckoned him to follow her toward the center of the settlement. As he walked, he noticed the way everyone moved, almost silently, as if attuned to the forest around them. Their homes were small but sturdy, built from wood and stone, blending seamlessly with the natural environment. Everything seemed alive and harmonious, from the gardens to the fences made of twisted vines. Once they reached a larger hut at the center, the silver-haired woman gestured for him to sit on a simple wooden bench. "We are not ordinary people," she began. "Our ancestors lived with the fox spirits in these forests. They taught us balance, patience, and respect for all living things. We live quietly to preserve that harmony. You found her because fate led you here." He blinked. "Fox spirits. Are you saying she's like a fox?" The woman shook her head gently. "She is human, but her spirit carries the essence of the fox. Her kind has always protected the forest, its creatures, and the wisdom passed down through generations. You, by saving her, showed a connection to our ways. That is why we call you chosen." He tried to process this. Everything seemed unreal: the forest, the people, the idea of fox spirits. But the sincerity in her eyes, the calm in the settlement, and the presence of the woman he had rescued made it difficult to dismiss. "What do you want from me?" he asked cautiously. "Nothing immediate," she replied. "First, you must rest. You are soaked, tired, and the forest journey took more from you than you know. Tomorrow, you will understand more. Today, only rest." He nodded, too drained to argue. They offered him a simple meal of vegetables and grains. The flavors were unfamiliar yet comforting, filled with an earthiness that reminded him of the forest itself. He ate quietly, watching the residents move around with gentle efficiency. There was a rhythm to their actions, a natural order that made even small tasks seem important. Later, they provided him with dry clothing and a small bed inside the central hut. The room was simple wooden walls, a soft mat for sleeping, and a few handmade decorations depicting forests and animals. He lay down, still holding on to the thought of the woman he had rescued. She had been unconscious all evening, resting peacefully under their care. As he tried to sleep, his mind wandered. He thought about the accident, the storm, and the strange cries that had led him here. He questioned if he had been imagining parts of the night, but he knew the forest, the settlement, and the people were real. They had saved the woman, and in doing so, they had given him a glimpse into a world he never knew existed. By morning, the woman he had rescued had awakened. She was sitting quietly by the small hearth, her amber eyes calm but aware. When she saw him awake, she smiled softly. "You did well," she said. "You did not turn away when it would have been easy to do so. That is why the elders recognize your presence here as important." He helped her to stand. Her leg was sore, but her movements were careful and deliberate. The residents offered herbs and poultices to ease her pain. Watching them, he realized their knowledge of nature was profound. They understood the forests, plants, weather patterns, and animals in a way that no textbook or school could teach. As the day went on, he learned more about the settlement. The people explained that they had lived hidden from the world for generations, maintaining traditions that honored the forest and the creatures that lived within it. They believed that fox spirits had once guided their ancestors, teaching them lessons about patience, cunning, and care for all living things. These lessons were passed down in stories, songs, and daily practices, ensuring the wisdom was never lost. He also began to understand that his arrival was not random. In their culture, acts of kindness and courage were signs of connection to the forest's deeper truths. By saving the woman, he had unknowingly demonstrated qualities they valued most: compassion, bravery, and respect for life. These qualities marked him as someone who could be trusted to carry their knowledge forward. Even if he was not yet fully aware of what that meant, throughout the day, he noticed small details that made the settlement feel alive. Birds perched fearlessly near the huts, curious about his presence. Streams of water ran clean and clear, reflecting the morning sunlight in tiny dancing patterns. Children, when they appeared, played quietly, learning from their elders while remaining careful not to disturb the forest. Every element seemed connected, creating a sense of balance he had never experienced in his urban life. By evening, the rescued woman was walking with more confidence. She looked at him with a quiet gratitude, though her words were few. The silver-haired guide explained that it would take time for him to fully understand their ways. "Patience," she said. "Everything unfolds when it is meant to. Today, you saw what needed seeing. Tomorrow, you will begin to understand more about why you were brought here." As night fell, he stepped outside and looked at the stars. The forest was calm, the storm long gone. He realized that he no longer felt like an intruder. Somehow, in a single night of rain, fear, and uncertainty, he had entered a world that was both foreign and familiar. It was a place where humans and spirits, myth and reality, seemed to coexist, and he was now a part of it, whether he understood it fully or not. He returned to the hut, feeling a mix of exhaustion and awe. He lay down to sleep again, But this time, his mind was alive with thoughts of what had happened. The forest, the woman, and the settlement's people had changed something in him. He did not yet know what he was chosen to do, but he understood that his life had shifted in ways that could never be reversed. As he drifted into sleep, he felt a quiet certainty, almost as if the forest itself had whispered a promise that he was exactly where he was meant to be. And somewhere in the shadows, unseen but present, the fox spirits watched, acknowledging his presence and his choice to act with courage and care. He woke the next morning to the soft sound of birds singing in the trees. Sunlight streamed through the gaps in the wooden walls of the hut, warming the small room. The rescued woman was already awake, sitting quietly near the hearth. She looked at him with the same calm, intelligent gaze as the day before. But there was a new kind of energy in her eyes, like she had been waiting for something to begin. He sat up slowly, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Good morning," he said. She nodded in reply, but did not speak immediately. Instead, she motioned for him to follow her outside. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet earth and growing plants. The storm from the previous day had left the forest alive with sound, the trickle of streams, rustling leaves, and distant calls of animals. It was a world he had rarely noticed before. Despite years of walking through parks and natural areas near his city, "Today," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm, "you will begin to understand what it means to be chosen." He frowned slightly. "I still don't understand. Chosen for what? I helped you? Yes. But that's it. I'm not special." She shook her head. "It is not about being special in the way you think. It is about understanding, seeing, and acting in a way that preserves what is important. You help someone in need without thinking of yourself. That is rare. That is why you were chosen." He listened carefully, trying to absorb her words. As they walked together toward the center of the settlement, he noticed more details he had missed the day before. Children were learning to move quietly through the forest, mimicking the animals around them. Adults were performing tasks with careful attention, gathering herbs, repairing fences, and tending to small animals. Everything seemed to have a purpose, as if the people in the forest were part of one connected life. The woman led him to a larger gathering area, where several other adults were seated in a circle. They greeted him calmly but with clear interest, their eyes studying him as if measuring something invisible. One of the elders, an older man with long silver hair and eyes that seemed to see everything, spoke. "He helped her," the elder said, gesturing toward the rescued woman. "That is the proof of his connection." The woman nodded. His action showed understanding and care. That is what the forest recognizes. He felt a mixture of pride and confusion. He had acted out of instinct, not knowledge. Yet they treated it as if he had completed some important test. The elder continued, explaining the meaning of being chosen. To be chosen is not about power, wealth, or status. It is about responsibility. The fox spirits chose him because he has the qualities to help maintain balance, to protect what is fragile, and to guide those who cannot guide themselves. He took a deep breath. The weight of their words began to settle on him. This was bigger than he could have imagined. He was not just visiting a hidden settlement. He was becoming part of something ancient, something alive in a way he had never experienced. "Will I have to stay here?" he asked cautiously. The woman smiled softly. "For now, you will stay. You must learn. You will understand what is needed, and then you will decide your path. But you cannot leave unprepared. The forest, the people, the spirits, they are connected, and you cannot ignore that connection." Over the next hours, she showed him around the settlement. He saw the depth of knowledge embedded in every action. Herbs were gathered and prepared not only for healing but for preserving the forest. Water was directed through small channels to nourish plants without harming the ecosystem. Animals, even the smallest, were respected as part of the balance. Every detail seemed to carry meaning, a lesson in observation, care, and thoughtfulness. As they walked, she explained more about her kind. "We are descended from those who walked with the fox spirits," she said. "Our people have always been guardians protectors of balance. Our stories, our customs, our work in the forest, it all carries the memory of those who came before. When someone is chosen, it is a recognition that they can see the world in a way that aligns with that memory. He tried to understand, but it felt overwhelming. He had been an ordinary man, living in a busy city, focused on daily work and immediate concerns. Now he was being asked to see the world differently, to recognize patterns, responsibilities, and connections he had never noticed before. When they returned to the central hut, she showed him how to care for simple tasks in their way. He learned how to prepare herbs for basic healing, how to move quietly through the forest, and how to observe animals without disturbing them. At first, the movements felt awkward and unfamiliar, but she corrected him patiently, showing that the key was attention and respect. Not speed or strength. You are learning, she said, watching him with a faint smile. But remember, this is more than doing things correctly. It is seeing and understanding. Being chosen is not about what you can do. It is about how you think, how you see, how you care. Hours passed, and he began to notice changes in himself. His mind, usually cluttered with daily concerns, became quiet. He observed the way sunlight fell on the trees, the patterns of leaves in the wind, the rhythm of water in a small stream. For the first time, he felt attuned to something larger than himself. The forest was no longer a backdrop to life. It was alive, and he was a part of it. In the evening, the elders gathered again. The rescued woman sat nearby, watching him with quiet intensity. "You have seen more today," one of the elders said, "but there is more to understand. Being chosen is a journey, not a moment. Each action, each thought, each choice shapes how you serve the forest and those who live within it." He listened, understanding only a fraction, yet sensing the truth behind the words. Their world was not just a hidden settlement. It was a living lesson in responsibility, patience, and care. The concept of being chosen was not a privilege, it was a task, a calling, a commitment to see beyond immediate needs and consider the consequences of every action. That night, he lay on his simple mat, thinking about what he had learned. The rescued woman slept nearby, her presence reassuring. He understood that his life had shifted in ways that could not be undone. He was no longer an ordinary visitor. He was part of a world that required awareness, courage, and compassion. Before sleeping, he walked outside once more. The forest was bathed in moonlight, casting silver shadows over the trees. He could hear the soft movements of animals and the distant sound of water. A quiet sense of purpose filled him, and he felt a strange connection to everything around him. The night was not dark. It was alive, full of unseen watchers, guides, and teachers, as he returned to the hut. He realized that being chosen was not a burden to fear, nor a prize to celebrate. It was a responsibility to grow, to learn, and to act with care. And somewhere in the quiet of the forest, the fox spirits, if they existed, had recognized his presence, testing him not with words, but with the simple act of seeing, helping, and understanding. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring new lessons, new challenges, and new discoveries. But tonight, he slept with a calm mind, feeling the forest around him as if it were a living companion. And somewhere deep within, he understood that being chosen was only the beginning of a journey he had never expected but was now ready to take. The next morning, he woke to a soft, golden light filtering through the forest canopy. The air was cool and smelled of wet leaves and pine. The rescued woman was already awake, sitting outside near the small garden. She seemed at ease, calm and focused, tending to tiny shoots of plants that had survived the previous night's storm. Her movements were careful, deliberate, almost like a dance. Watching her, he realized how much she was connected to the world around her. Every small action mattered. Every gesture seemed in balance with nature. When she noticed him watching, she smiled faintly. "It is time," she said simply. "You must understand more today." He nodded, feeling a mixture of curiosity and unease. Though he had learned a lot about the settlement and their ways, he still felt like an outsider. Part of him wanted to run back to his old life, to forget everything he had seen. Yet another part of him felt drawn in, compelled to see what lay beyond the small lessons he had already been taught. She led him through the settlement again. But this time, the pace was different. He noticed that people were working together in subtle ways. One person passed water to another quietly. A child followed a parent silently, mimicking every step. Everything was interconnected. Nothing happened by accident. She explained that every action in the settlement, no matter how small, was meant to maintain harmony with the forest. You see, she said, our lives are tied to every living thing here. When one of us acts carelessly, it affects everything. The forest, the water, the animals, even those of us who live here, we are all connected. He tried to grasp it, but it was difficult. In the city, life had been about speed and results. Here it was about observation, patience, and thought. He realized he had never truly looked at the world around him, not really. The forest demanded attention, and it did not forgive carelessness. That afternoon, an unexpected challenge arose. As they walked near a small stream, they noticed a group of strangers approaching. The newcomers were loud, careless, and seemed unaware of the delicate balance in the forest. They were hunters, or perhaps travelers, moving too quickly, breaking small branches, and scaring away animals. The woman's face darkened, her calm demeanor shifting slightly to concern. "They do not understand," she whispered. "They will disrupt the balance." He felt a sudden panic. These people could discover the settlement, the hidden village, the people she had saved. He thought of running forward to warn them, but she placed a hand on his arm. "Patience," she said. "Watch first. Act wisely." For the first time, he understood that being chosen was not about physical strength or bravery alone. It was about judgment, patience, and awareness. He had to learn when to act and when to observe. They moved silently through the undergrowth, keeping out of sight. He watched the strangers closely. One of them carelessly kicked a small animal burrow, causing a family of rabbits to scatter. The forest seemed to react, the birds went silent, and even the water in the stream appeared to ripple in tension. "This is why you were brought here," the woman said softly. "To see, to learn, to understand that your actions and your choices carry weight." Nodded, swallowing hard. The responsibility felt heavy. Back in his city life, choices were simple tasks, completed or not. Here, one mistake could affect lives he had never even met. One wrong move could threaten the fragile harmony he was just beginning to see after the strangers moved on. The woman led him back to the settlement. She spoke gently about the importance of balance. "Our people live quietly to preserve knowledge and wisdom. We do not seek conflict, but we must protect what is precious. You will learn in time how to do the same." As the day went on, he was given tasks to help maintain the settlement. He gathered herbs, repaired fences, and helped carry small amounts of water from the stream. At first, the work seemed simple, almost menial. But as he continued, he realized there was depth in every task. Gathering herbs was not just about collecting plants, it required understanding which plants were ready, which were needed, and how removing them would affect the forest. Repairing fences was not about keeping animals out. It was about guiding them safely, without harming the natural flow of the land. With every action, he began to feel a sense of connection. The forest was no longer a backdrop. It was alive, responsive, and full of purpose. He felt a quiet pride in contributing, helping maintain the delicate balance that everyone in the settlement relied upon. That evening, the elders gathered again. This time, he was included in their circle. They spoke in low, careful tones, explaining the history of their people, the wisdom passed down from fox spirits, the meaning of being chosen. "You were chosen not because of what you have done alone," one elder said. "You were chosen because you see, because you care, and because you act with compassion. These are qualities that protect life, balance, and wisdom." He listened intently. The weight of their words pressed on him, but not in fear. It was a responsibility that demanded attention and dedication. He understood that being chosen was not an honor to boast about. It was a path to follow, a journey that required patience, humility, and courage. The rescued woman approached him afterward. "You did well today," she said. "You observed, you learned, and you acted wisely. You are beginning to understand what it means to be chosen." He nodded, feeling both proud and anxious. He had learned much, but he knew there was still more ahead. The forest, the settlement, and its people were teaching him to see the world differently, to value patience over speed, observation over assumption, and connection over isolation. That night, he lay down on his mat thinking about the events of the day. The strangers in the forest had reminded him that the world outside the settlement was not always aware of its own fragility. People could act carelessly without understanding the consequences. The settlement's careful ways were a shield, a way to preserve balance and knowledge. He realized that part of being chosen was to understand both the beauty and the fragility of life. He also thought about the woman he had rescued. Her presence was calm, guiding, and unwavering. She represented the living connection to the fox spirits and the wisdom of the settlement. Saving her had brought him here. But now he saw that learning from her was what truly mattered. As he drifted into sleep, he felt the forest around him. The trees whispered softly in the night wind. The water rippled quietly in the stream, and small animals moved carefully through the undergrowth. Everything felt alive, connected, and watched. He understood, deep down, that being chosen was more than a title. It was a responsibility to see, understand, and act with care to protect what could not protect itself, and to carry the lessons forward. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, perhaps new challenges, and certainly more understanding. But tonight, he slept with a quiet mind, feeling the weight of responsibility and the comfort of belonging. He had been chosen not for glory, but for purpose, and the journey of understanding had only just begun. The morning air was crisp and still as he woke. He could hear birds singing softly in the trees and the quiet movement of small animals in the underbrush. The settlement had already begun its day. People were moving quietly but purposefully, carrying out their tasks with the same careful attention he had begun to notice. The rescued woman was already tending the garden, and when she saw him, she gave a small, encouraging nod. "You are ready," she said simply. "Today, you will understand what being chosen truly means." He followed her through the settlement, observing the rhythm of life around him. Children were learning to move quietly through the forest, mimicking the adults and the animals around them. Every action seemed to serve a purpose. Nothing was wasted, nothing accidental. He realized that this careful attention extended beyond the settlement. Everything they did was meant to preserve balance, to honor the forest, and to protect the fragile life within it as they walked. The woman explained more about her people. "Our ancestors lived in harmony with the fox spirits," she said. "They taught us how to see the forest not just with our eyes, but with our understanding. The spirits watch, and they guide those who are aware. You were chosen because you listened when it mattered, because you acted without thinking only of yourself." He tried to absorb her words. Everything about this world was so different from his life in the city. There, people were busy, distracted, often acting without thought for the consequences. Here, every action had meaning. He realized that being chosen was not a reward, it was a responsibility. That afternoon, a small challenge arose that tested everything he had learned. While walking near a quiet stream, he noticed a tree that had fallen across the path. Beneath it, a young deer was trapped, its leg caught under the heavy trunk. The rescued woman stood beside him silently, her eyes calm but attentive. "You must help," she said softly. He hesitated, unsure how to act. The deer was frightened, thrashing occasionally, and the trunk was heavy and wet from the rain the day before. But he remembered everything he had learned: patience, careful observation, and respect for the life around him. Taking a deep breath, he approached slowly, speaking softly to the animal. He used sticks and small rocks to carefully lift the trunk just enough to free its leg, all while keeping himself steady. The deer hesitated, then quickly ran back into the forest. He breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that the act of helping without harm was at the heart of what it meant to be chosen. The woman smiled faintly. "Today, you saw more than action. You saw consequence, awareness, and responsibility. This is what being chosen requires." He understood then that the word chosen did not mean he had power or importance in the usual sense. It meant he had been recognized as someone capable of seeing, understanding, and acting with care for the world around him. The forest, the people, and perhaps even the spirits had acknowledged his presence. Not as a reward, but as a trust. Over the next few hours, he continued to help in small but meaningful ways. He tended plants that needed water, helped repair small fences, and even observed the young children as they learned the delicate art of moving quietly through the forest. Each task taught him something new about patience, about seeing the hidden details of life, and about understanding his place in a larger system of balance. By evening, the elders gathered again, as they had each day. This time, he felt less like an outsider and more like a student. They spoke of history, of the fox spirits, and of the ways their people had preserved balance for generations. He listened carefully, realizing that every story, every lesson, and every tradition was meant to prepare him to carry the responsibility of awareness. The rescued woman approached him afterward. "You have learned well," she said. "You understand that being chosen is not about honor. It is about seeing the unseen, acting when necessary, and protecting what cannot protect itself. Your journey does not end here. You must continue to grow, to learn, and to act with wisdom." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. The forest had changed him. The settlement had changed him. He was no longer the man who had stumbled into the ravine in a storm. He was someone who could see, understand, and act with care. As night fell, he walked outside one last time before resting. The forest was quiet, the moon casting silver light across the trees. He could hear the subtle sounds of animals moving, the wind through the leaves, and the gentle flow of water in the stream. He realized that the forest was alive in a way he had never experienced before. Every movement, every sound carried meaning. He felt a connection, a sense of responsibility, and a quiet trust that he had not known before. He returned to the hut and lay down on his mat. Sleep came easily, but his mind was alive with thought. He understood now that being chosen was not about recognition or reward. It was about responsibility, awareness, and care. It was about seeing the connections between actions, people, and the natural world, and doing what was necessary to maintain balance. In the days that followed, he continued to learn. He helped with small tasks, observed the settlement, and deepened his understanding of the forest and its ways. Each day brought new lessons, small discoveries, and moments of quiet reflection. The rescued woman guided him patiently, never rushing, allowing him to grow into the role that had been quietly placed upon him. Eventually, he knew he would have to leave the settlement and return to his previous life. But he also knew that he would carry these lessons with him wherever he went. He had been chosen not for glory, not for power, but for understanding and responsibility. The connection he had made to the forest, to the people, and to the unseen forces around them was now a part of him. When the day came for him to depart, the rescued woman and the elders gathered to see him off. They did not give him instructions or commands. Instead, they offered quiet guidance, gentle smiles, and a sense of trust. He realized that being chosen was not about what others demanded from him. It was about what he would choose to do with the knowledge and awareness he had gained. As he walked back toward the world outside the forest, he felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. He knew that life would never be the same again. He had been chosen, yes, but more importantly, he had accepted the responsibility that came with it. The lessons of the forest, the guidance of the rescued woman, and the trust of the settlement would remain with him, quietly shaping his actions, his thoughts, and the way he saw the world. The journey had begun in fear and uncertainty, but it ended in understanding and connection. He had learned that being chosen was not about the recognition of others. It was about awareness, compassion, and care for the world around him. And with that knowledge, he returned to his life, changed forever. Carrying the wisdom of the forest and the settlement wherever he went,